thought fresh is best.
It's not that simple, Cho. So, the results are in.
A bag of frozen broccoli costs about $2. A head of fresh broccoli, roughly the same size, runs you $3.50, sometimes $4. And the frozen version is already washed, already cut, already ready to cook. So how is the cheaper option also the more convenient one? That doesn't make sense. In almost every other industry, convenience costs more. Pre-sliced cheese costs more than the block. Pre-cut fruit costs more than the whole melon. But frozen vegetables somehow break that rule. They cost less and save you time. The answer goes back over 100 years to a fur trader living in the Canadian Arctic who noticed something strange about the way fish froze in negative 40-degree weather. And the system he built around that observation didn't just change how we eat. It quietly became one of the most efficient supply chains on the planet, worth over $300 billion today. To understand why frozen vegetables are so cheap, you have to understand three things: how fresh produce actually gets to your grocery store, what happens to the vegetables that don't look pretty enough to sell, and a quirk of physics that a man named Clarence Birdseye figured out while watching Inuit fishermen on a frozen lake in Labrador. Let's start with the thing nobody thinks about. The hidden cost of fresh. When you buy a head of fresh broccoli at the grocery store, you're not just paying for the broccoli. You're paying for everything that had to go right to get it there. That broccoli was picked before it was fully ripe because it needed to survive the trip. It was loaded into a refrigerated truck, driven hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, kept at a precise temperature the entire way, unloaded at a distribution center, reloaded onto another truck, delivered to the store, and placed on a shelf where it has maybe a week before it starts turning yellow. And here's the part that actually drives the price up. A massive amount of that fresh produce never makes it to your plate. Supermarkets in the United States lose an estimated $15 billion every year in unsold fruits and vegetables alone. About 30% of the food in American grocery stores gets thrown away. For fresh produce specifically, the waste rate is even higher, around 45% for fruits and vegetables. That's nearly half of everything that hits the shelf. Think about what that means for pricing. The store has to charge enough on the broccoli you do buy to make up for all the broccoli that goes in the dumpster. Every bruised apple, every wilted lettuce head, every bag of spinach that expired before someone grabbed it. That cost gets baked into the price of everything else. You're not just paying for your vegetables, you're subsidizing the ones that rotted, but it gets worse. The waste doesn't start at the store, it starts at the farm. Farmers leave up to 30% of their produce unharvested in the field because it doesn't meet the cosmetic standards that grocery chains demand. A carrot that's too bent, a potato that's too lumpy, an apple without enough red on the skin. These are perfectly nutritious, perfectly edible vegetables that never leave the dirt because they are not pretty enough. The USDA has had grading standards for produce since 1945, defining what a number one fruit or vegetable should look like. And over time, retailers made those standards even stricter. One report found that a UK supermarket demanded their Gala apples have at least 50% red skin. The ones that didn't meet that threshold couldn't even be sold for juice, because the price offered wouldn't cover the cost of picking them. So 20% of that entire crop was wasted. This is the system that fresh produce operates in. Short shelf life, long supply chains, massive waste at every stage, and strict cosmetic standards that throw out perfectly good food before it even reaches a store. Every one of those inefficiencies makes your fresh broccoli more expensive. Now here's where frozen vegetables flip the entire model. When a vegetable is destined for the freezer aisle, none of those problems apply. And the reason starts with a fur trader from Brooklyn who dropped out of college. Clarence Birdseye was working in Labrador, Canada around 1912, trapping and trading fur. While living among the Inuit, he noticed something that would change the food industry forever. When the Inuit caught fish in negative 40-degree weather, the fish froze almost instantly. And when those fish thawed weeks or months later, they tasted fresh. Not mushy, not bland, fresh. Birdseye realized the secret was speed. When food freezes slowly, large ice crystals form inside the cells, rupturing the cell walls. That's why slowly frozen food turns mushy when it thaws. But when food freezes fast, the crystals are tiny. The cells stay intact. The texture holds. He spent years trying to replicate that effect mechanically. His first frozen fish company failed. His second one struggled. But he kept refining the technology, and by 1929, Marjorie Merriweather Post, the wealthiest woman in America at the time, saw what he'd built and bought his company and all his patents for $22 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $300 million today for frozen vegetables. From a college dropout fur trader, General Foods, as the company became known, launched the first retail frozen foods in 1930 at 18 stores in Springfield, Massachusetts. The initial product line had 26 items, including frozen spinach and peas. Consumers loved them. But the real explosion came during World War II, when women entered the workforce and families needed quick meals. Frozen food became the answer. The technology Birdseye pioneered is still the foundation of what happens today, just faster and more refined. Modern frozen vegetable processing works like this. Vegetables are harvested at peak ripeness, not early like fresh produce. They're washed, blanched in boiling water or steam to stop the enzyme activity that causes spoilage, then cut to size and blast, frozen at extremely low temperatures. The whole process from field to freezer happens within hours of harvest. That's the first reason frozen is cheaper. The vegetables are picked when they're actually ready, not weeks before. There's no race against the clock to get them sold before they go bad. But the real savings come from what happens next, or more accurately, what doesn't happen. Fresh produce needs refrigerated trucks, tight delivery windows, and constant temperature monitoring across a supply chain that has zero room for error. One broken cooler, one delayed shipment, and the whole load is ruined. That urgency costs money. And as anyone who's ever paid for express shipping knows, the faster you need something delivered, the more expensive it gets. Frozen vegetables don't have that problem. Once they're frozen, time is on their side. They can sit in a warehouse for months. They can be shipped by the cheapest available route. There's no rush, no spoilage window, no panic. The supply chain can be optimized for cost instead of speed. And remember all that waste we talked about with fresh produce? Frozen vegetables barely have any. A bag of frozen peas can sit in a store's freezer for months without losing quality. There's no wilting, no browning, no expiration panic. The store doesn't have to throw away half its inventory, which means it doesn't have to inflate prices to cover the loss. There's another factor that rarely gets mentioned. Frozen vegetable companies can use produce that would never survive the beauty pageant of the fresh aisle. That bent carrot works fine when it's chopped and frozen. That oddly shaped broccoli floret looks identical to every other floret once it's in a bag. Frozen processing essentially erases cosmetic imperfection, which means companies can buy produce that fresh market retailers would reject. And that produce is cheaper to source because there's less competition for it. So let's add it all up. Frozen vegetables are harvested at peak ripeness instead of early. They're processed within hours, locking in nutrients. They require no expensive rush logistics. They generate almost zero waste at the retail level. They can use cosmetically imperfect produce that costs less to source. And the technology that makes all of this possible has been refined for nearly 100 years. The real question isn't why frozen vegetables are so cheap, it's why fresh vegetables are so expensive. The fresh produce system is built on waste, speed, and appearance. The frozen system is built on efficiency, patience, and the simple physics of rapid freezing. And there's one more thing worth knowing. Research from the University of California, Davis found that frozen vegetables can actually contain higher levels of certain vitamins than fresh ones. That sounds counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you think about it. Fresh vegetables start losing nutrients the moment they're picked. By the time they've traveled across the country, sat in a warehouse and spent a few days on a shelf, a significant amount of their nutritional value has degraded. Frozen vegetables, on the other hand, are locked in at peak nutrition within hours of harvest. So in many cases, the cheaper option is also the healthier one. The frozen food industry today is worth somewhere between $300 and $500 billion globally, depending on which research firm you ask. Nearly every household in America buys frozen food at some point during the year. And the entire thing traces back to a fur trader watching fish freeze on a lake in Labrador. Clarence Birdseye died in 1956 at the Gramercy Park Hotel in New York City. He held nearly 300 patents. The brand that carries his name, Birdseye, is still one of the biggest frozen food brands in the world. And the core technology he developed, rapid freezing to preserve cell structure, is still the basis of how every bag of frozen vegetables in your grocery store gets made. Next time you're standing in the produce section, debating between a fresh head of broccoli for $4 and a frozen bag for $2, just know that the cheaper one isn't cheaper because it's worse. It's cheaper because the system behind it is better. Faster processing, less waste, simpler logistics, and a century of engineering that started with one observation on a frozen lake. If you found this interesting, subscribe, because next time we're breaking down another product you use every day that's way cheaper than it should be. That video is on screen now.